In a village where a woman's worth is measured by how big her breasts are, the curve of her body, and the strength of her lineage, Nnshera stands as a stark contrast. Slender, flat-chested, and dismissed by her own family as a disappointment. While the village's most beautiful woman, Amma, commands the admiration of all, Nnshera quietly navigates a world that barely sees her. But when fate intertwines her life with that of Kwesi, a man in search of more than just beauty, the village is about to witness a transformation no one could have imagined. In this tale of resilience, love, and redemption, the very qualities that made Nnshera invisible will become her greatest strength. But with Amma lurking in the shadows, burning with jealousy, the price of Nnshera's rise may be steep, deadly even. In Akua, traditions ran deep. Every family, every generation, held tightly to beliefs that had shaped their lives for centuries. One of these beliefs, perhaps the most prominent, was that a woman's worth was tied to her ability to bear and nurture children. And in this village, a woman's physical appearance, particularly the fullness of her breasts, was seen as the clearest sign of her potential as a mother. The bigger the breasts, the more fertile and capable the woman was believed to be. These traditions governed every aspect of life, especially the role of women. From birth, a girl's future was determined by her ability to bear children, and just as importantly, by her physical appearance. The village elders spoke of a time-honored belief: the larger a woman's breasts, the better mother she would be. It was said that women with full chests were blessed by the gods, able to produce many healthy children and nourish them with abundance. But Nnshera did not fit into this world of expectations. Nnshera, slender and flat-chested, had always been an outlier. From a young age, she could feel the weight of the villagers' expectations and disappointments. Her parents, Kofi and Adjoa, had been devastated when it became clear that their daughter was not growing as they had hoped. They had named her Nnshera, meaning blessing, in anticipation of the joy she would bring. But as she grew older, their hopes faded as Nnshera remained flat-chested. Kofi would often sit on the front porch, watching the other girls of the village blossom into full-figured women. He would glance at Nnshera out of the corner of his eye, his face set in a permanent frown. Adjoa, once a proud and doting mother, became withdrawn, unable to hide her disappointment with her only daughter Nnshera. "What will become of you, Nnshera?" she would mutter under her breath, shaking her head as she cooked meals in silence. "How will you ever find a husband? What man will want a woman who can't even breastfeed her children?" As Nnshera grew, her body refused to conform to the village's ideals. While other girls blossomed into womanhood with round, full figures, Nnshera remained slender, her chest flat. It wasn't long before the villagers began to talk. "Poor girl," they would say as Nnshera passed by. "Her head lowered, her steps quick. She will never be able to feed her children. No man will want her." These whispers followed Nnshera wherever she went. She felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, a constant reminder of her inadequacies. Her parents, though they never said it directly, were ashamed. Kofi, once a proud and loving father, had grown distant over the years. He would watch Nnshera from the corner of his eye, his face set in a permanent frown, as if her very presence was a disappointment. Nnshera had heard these words so many times that they no longer stung. They had become a part of her daily life, woven into the fabric of her existence. She learned to carry herself quietly, avoiding the gaze of the other villagers as she went about her chores. She had accepted her place in the village's hierarchy, unseen, unnoticed, and undesirable. Amma, on the other hand, was the village jewel. Amma was the very embodiment of what Akua considered beautiful. Her chest was full, her curves generous, and her smile radiant. Everywhere she went, people stopped and stared, and Amma basked in the attention. She was the woman every mother pointed to as an example for their daughters, the woman every man dreamed of marrying, and fathers would joke with their sons about finding a wife as beautiful as Amma. Amma's presence was like a bright, glowing flame that drew everyone in. With her full curves and radiant beauty, she epitomized everything the village held dear. Amma knew the power her beauty gave her, and she wielded it with precision. She basked in the adoration of the villagers, particularly the men, who tripped over themselves to win her favor. But beneath her dazzling, flawless body lay a heart full of arrogance and cruelty. She was cold-hearted and self-serving. She enjoyed the power her beauty gave her, and she never hesitated to use it to belittle others. Amma used her beauty as a tool to manipulate others, and though the villagers didn't see it, those closest to her knew that her charm was only skin deep. Those she deemed unworthy, those who did not meet her standards, became the targets of her sharp tongue. Nnshera had been on the receiving end of Amma's cruelty many times. Though Amma rarely addressed her directly, the insults would come in the form of offhand comments made to others in her presence. "Some people will never know what it's like to be a real woman," Amma would say, her eyes darting to Nnshera's flat chest. "It must be hard, knowing you'll never be able to feed a child properly." The other girls in the village would giggle, but the laughter was always laced with nervousness. Amma's influence over them was absolute. They followed her lead, even if it meant hurting others. Because to oppose her was to risk becoming her next target. Kwesi was a man of wealth and status. The son of the largest cocoa farmer in the region, he had grown up knowing he would one day inherit not only his father's fortune, but also the responsibility of continuing the family legacy. Ya, his mother, had always been clear about what kind of woman he should marry. Someone beautiful, fertile, and capable of giving him many children. And in Akukrom, there was no woman more fitting for this role than Amma. Kwesi had always admired Amma from afar. Like everyone else, he had been captivated by her beauty, and when his mother suggested that he court her, he had agreed without much thought. "She's the perfect match for you, Kwesi," Ya had said. "Strong, beautiful, and blessed by the gods, she will give you many children." At first, Kwesi had been excited to get to know Amma. Their early dates were full of polite conversation and admiration from the villagers. Wherever they went, people would stop and stare, marveling at the sight of the village's most eligible bachelor with its most beautiful woman. But as time went on, Kwesi began to notice something unsettling about Amma. While her beauty was undeniable, her kindness was non-existent. She would belittle the villagers who served them, complaining about the food or the service, with a coldness that made Kwesi uncomfortable. She spoke about other women with disdain, mocking their appearances or laughing at their misfortunes. Kwesi began to feel the weight of his family's expectations on his shoulders. He knew that his mother expected him to marry a woman like Amma, someone who fit the village's ideals of beauty and fertility. But the more time he spent with Amma, the more he realized that her beauty masked an ugly heart. Amma's behavior at social events began to weigh heavily on Kwesi. There were instances when Amma made cruel remarks about those who didn't meet her standards. One evening, after attending a village gathering where Amma had been particularly harsh, Kwesi found himself questioning the entire courtship. He had seen enough to know that her beauty was only surface deep. Kwesi's early encounters with Amma had been pleasant enough. She would smile sweetly, laugh at his jokes, and charm those around her. But it wasn't long before Kwesi began to notice a darker side to Amma's personality. She was dismissive of the villagers, especially those she deemed beneath her. She would make cruel remarks about other women, mocking their appearances in ways that made Kwesi uncomfortable. One evening, while walking through the market, Kwesi overheard Amma speaking to her friends about a woman in the village who had recently lost her child. The woman, frail and grieving, had passed by them, and Amma, in her usual mocking tone, had said, "Maybe if she had been more like me, her baby would still be alive. Women like that can't even feed their own children properly." Kwesi felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He couldn't believe Amma could be so heartless, especially in the face of such tragedy. For the first time, Kwesi began to question what kind of person Amma truly was. It wasn't until Kwesi overheard Amma mocking a grieving mother that he realized just how cruel she could be. They had been walking through the village when they passed a woman who had recently lost her child. The woman's face was drawn with grief, her eyes hollow. As they walked past, Amma turned to her friends and whispered, "Maybe if her breasts were bigger, her child would have survived." Kwesi stopped in his tracks, a surge of anger rising in his chest. How could someone be so heartless? He had always known Amma was vain, but this was different. This was cruelty, pure and simple. That night, Kwesi confronted Amma about her behavior. "Why would you say something so cruel?" he asked, his voice tight with anger. "That woman is in pain and you mocked her." Amma waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, Kwesi, don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke." But it wasn't a joke to Kwesi. He realized then that Amma's beauty was only skin deep, and that beneath her flawless exterior lay a heart full of selfishness. It wasn't just her words that bothered Kwesi. It was the way she treated his family. Amma's interactions with Ya were polite but distant. She made little effort to connect with Kwesi's mother, often brushing off her attempts to engage in conversation. At first, Ya had been willing to overlook this, attributing it to Amma's youth and nervousness. But as time went on, Ya began to see Amma's true nature. During a family dinner one evening, Amma made a series of cutting remarks about the servants who worked for Kwesi's family. "They're so slow," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I don't understand how you put up with them." Ya, who had known many of the servants for years, was shocked by Amma's tone. "They work hard," she said, her voice tight. "And they are like family to us." Amma laughed, not realizing the offense she had caused. "Family, they're just servants." Kwesi's mother saw in that moment that Amma lacked the empathy and humility needed to be part of their family. She began to reconsider her approval of Amma and expressed her concerns to Kwesi. "I was wrong about her," Ya admitted to her son one evening after Amma had left their home. "She may be beautiful, but she lacks the heart of a good wife." Kwesi listened to his mother's words, and as he reflected on his relationship with Amma, he realized that her beauty had blinded him to her flaws. It wasn't long before he ended their courtship, much to the shock of the village. The news of Kwesi and Amma's breakup spread through the village like wildfire. It seemed incomprehensible to many that Kwesi, the most eligible bachelor in Akukram, would walk away from Amma, the village's jewel. The villagers, who had once idolized Amma, began to distance themselves from her. Amma, for the first time in her life, felt the sting of being an outsider. But Amma was not one to accept defeat easily. She couldn't understand how she had lost Kwesi, and worse, she couldn't believe that he had started to notice someone like Nnshera. Amma's bitterness grew with each passing day, her resentment toward Nnshera festering into something ugly. In her mind, Nnshera had somehow stolen what rightfully belonged to her. The annual harvest festival was fast approaching, and Amma knew this would be her opportunity to regain the attention she had lost. The festival was the highlight of the village's year, a time of celebration, dancing, and feasting. Every family would be there, dressed in their finest clothes, and Amma planned to make a grand entrance that would remind the village why she had always been the most admired woman in Akukram. The day of the festival arrived, and as expected, Amma was dressed to impress. She wore a radiant kente cloth that hugged her curves perfectly, her hair styled elaborately, her makeup flawless. When she walked into the village square, heads turned. But for the first time, the admiration she craved didn't come. Instead, there were murmurs, whispers about how she had treated Kwesi, how her beauty had failed to hide her cruel heart. And there, standing quietly on the outskirts of the crowd, was Nnshera. Nnshera had never expected to be the center of attention, nor did she want it. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back modestly, her demeanor humble. But despite her simplicity, there was a quiet grace about her that Kwesi found captivating. He watched her from across the square, his heart swelling with admiration for the woman who had never sought recognition, yet stood out more than any other. Amma couldn't take it any longer. Seeing Kwesi's gaze fixed on Nnshera sent her into a jealous rage. She marched toward Nnshera, her voice loud and cutting. "Well, look who we have here," Amma said, her words dripping with malice. "Nnshera, darling, do you think you're fooling anyone? We all know you'll never be able to satisfy Kwesi the way I could. After all, you don't exactly have what it takes." Her words hung in the air, and laughter rippled through the crowd. Nnshera, humiliated, stood frozen, her face flushed with embarrassment. She had been ridiculed before, but never so publicly, never with such venom. Kwesi, who had been watching from a distance, felt his blood boil. He pushed through the crowd and came to stand beside Nnshera, his voice firm as he addressed Amma. "That's enough," he said, his eyes dark with anger. "You think beauty gives you the right to treat others like this? You're wrong, Amma. Beauty fades, but kindness, humility, and strength, Those are what truly matter, and you have none of them." The crowd fell silent, stunned by Kwesi's words. Amma, caught off guard, could only stare at him, her face pale with shock. Kwesi turned to Nnshera, his voice softening. "Let's go," he said, taking her hand. Together, they walked through the crowd, leaving Amma standing alone, her once adored beauty now a source of her downfall. The villagers, who had always admired Amma's beauty, began to see her for what she truly was. Her cruelty, once hidden beneath her charm, was now laid bare for all to see. And as Kwesi and Nnshera walked away, hand in hand, Amma realized that her reign as the village jewel was over. As the days passed after the festival, Nnshera found herself the subject of more and more attention. People who had once ridiculed her for her appearance now looked at her with curiosity and, in some cases, admiration. But Nnshera remained humble, continuing to go about her life as she always had. She never sought attention, and she certainly never imagined that someone like Kwesi would want to spend time with her. But Kwesi had become increasingly drawn to Nnshera's quiet strength. He had seen her kindness, her resilience in the face of ridicule, and he admired the way she carried herself with dignity, even when others tried to tear her down. Over the next few weeks, Kwesi found himself seeking out Nnshera's company more and more. He would visit her under the guise of needing help with small tasks, but in truth, he was drawn to her warmth and kindness. She was nothing like Amma, and the more time he spent with her, the more he realized that true beauty wasn't something you could see, it was something you felt. One afternoon, as Kwesi walked through the market, he saw Nnshera helping an elderly woman carry her goods. He watched as she spoke kindly to the woman, her face lit up with a genuine smile. There was something about her that intrigued him, a quiet strength, a resilience that he hadn't noticed before. That evening, Kwesi made up his mind. He knew what he had to do. Nnshera was the woman he wanted to spend his life with, not because of her looks, but because of the way she made him feel. She had shown him what true beauty was, and he couldn't imagine his future without her. When Kwesi asked Nnshera to marry him, the village was stunned. How could Kwesi, the most eligible bachelor in Akua, choose a woman like Nnshera, a woman who had been the subject of ridicule for most of her life? Nnshera herself was shocked by the proposal. She had spent her entire life being told she wasn't good enough, that no man would ever want her. And now, here was Kwesi, offering her his hand in marriage. "I don't understand," Nnshera said, her voice trembling. "Why me?" Kwesi smiled, taking her hands in his. "Because you're the strongest, kindest person I've ever known," he said. "You've shown me that beauty is more than skin deep. You've shown me what it means to love with a full heart." Tears welled in Nnshera's eyes as she nodded, unable to find the words. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not for what she lacked, but for who she was. The village was abuzz with gossip the moment news of the engagement spread. The women in particular were bewildered. "Why Nnshera?" they asked each other in hushed tones. "What does he see in her?" For many of the villagers, it was incomprehensible that Kwesi, with his wealth and status, would choose someone so different from the village's ideal of womanhood. Some of the older women, those who had once been friends with Nnshera's mother, shook their heads in disbelief. "Kofi and Ajoa must be beside themselves," one woman said. "They've been ashamed of that girl for years, and now she's marrying the richest man in the village. It doesn't make sense." But not all the reactions were negative. There were those who had always seen Nnshera's kindness and resilience, even if they hadn't spoken of it openly. "She's a good girl," one elderly man said. "She may not have the looks that others value, but she has a heart of gold. Kwesi has chosen well." Nnshera's parents, Kofi and Ajoa, were caught in a whirlwind of emotions upon hearing the news of her engagement to Kwesi. For years, they had been embarrassed by their daughter, her flat chest a constant reminder of what they believed she lacked. They had long since given up hope that she would ever marry, let alone attract the attention of a man like Kwesi. When the news of the proposal reached them, they were stunned, unable to comprehend how their daughter, whom they had quietly pitied, could have secured the affections of such a man. Kofi, proud and pragmatic, was the first to speak his mind. "This is a blessing, Ajoa," he said as they sat together in the fading light of the evening. "Kwesi is a good man, a wealthy man. Nnshera will have a life we never could have imagined for her. Akua, however, was more conflicted. But why her? She asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. All her life, we've watched the other girls blossom, become what the village wanted them to be. How will she handle the expectations, and how can she ever be a proper mother? Kofi sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Maybe we've been wrong to judge her by what we see. Maybe there's more to her than we realized. Akua remained silent, her thoughts a tangled web of doubt and hope. She had spent so many years lamenting what Nnshera lacked that she had failed to see her daughter's inner strength, the quiet resilience that had allowed her to survive in a world that constantly judged her. Kwesi's mother, Ya, had a very different reaction. For years, she had dreamed of Amma becoming her daughter-in-law, certain that Amma's beauty and status would bring even more prestige to their family. When Kwesi broke off his courtship with Amma, Ya had been disappointed, but hopeful that he would choose another woman who fit the village's ideals. Nnshera was not the woman Ya had envisioned for her son. "This is a mistake, Kwesi," she told him sternly when he shared the news. "Nnshera is a good girl, yes, but she is not what you need. You need a woman who will give you strong, healthy children. Look at her. She's not built for that." Kwesi met his mother's gaze, his expression calm but resolute. "I know what I need, Mother, and it's not just about physical strength or appearance. Nnshera has a heart like no one else. She will be a good wife, a good mother." Ya shook her head in disbelief. "But the villagers, what will they say? You've built a reputation, Kwesi. You are the son of a wealthy family, and people expect you to marry a woman who reflects that. Nnshera, she is not what they expect." Kwesi's jaw tightened. "I don't care about what the villagers expect, Mother. I care about what I feel. Nnshera is the woman I want, and that's the end of it." Ya could see that there was no changing her son's mind. She sighed, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her disappointment. "If this is what you want, then so be it. But I pray you're making the right choice." Despite the mixed reactions, the marriage between Kwesi and Nnshera moved forward. The villagers, though still shocked, gathered to witness the union, curious about how it would unfold. Some attended out of genuine happiness for the couple, while others came merely to satisfy their curiosity, or, in the case of a few, to whisper about what they saw as an odd match. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Nnshera, dressed in a flowing kente gown, looked radiant, though there were still those who commented on her slight figure. "She doesn't look like a bride," one woman whispered to another. "No curves, no softness. How will she bear children?" But Kwesi saw none of that. To him, Nnshera was the most beautiful woman in the world, not because of her physical appearance, but because of the love and warmth she exuded. As he stood before her holding her hands, he felt a deep sense of peace. This was the woman he had chosen, and he knew in his heart that he had made the right decision. Nnshera, for her part, was overwhelmed with emotion. She had spent her life believing she was unworthy of love, that no man would ever want her. And now here she was, standing beside the most respected man in the village, pledging her life to him. She glanced at her parents in the crowd, and though their faces were stoic, she could see the glimmer of pride in her father's eyes. As the ceremony ended and the newlyweds walked hand in hand through the village, Nnshera felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. For the first time, she believed that her life could be something more than what the villagers had always told her it would be. The weeks following the marriage were filled with adjustments, both for Nnshera and for the villagers. Kwesi's home, a large, well-kept compound, became Nshera's new world, and she threw herself into her new role as a wife. Though she had never imagined herself in such a position, she quickly adapted, learning how to manage the household and support Kwesi in his work. But the villagers were not so quick to adapt. The women, in particular, still gossiped about the marriage. "It won't last," they would say as they gathered at the market. "She's not built to be a wife or a mother. Just wait. Kwesi will see soon enough." Amma, who had retreated from public life after her breakup with Kwesi, took the news of the marriage as a personal affront. Though she had lost much of her influence, she still harbored bitterness toward Nnshera. "She's nothing," Amma would mutter to herself. "She'll never be able to give Kwesi what he needs. Amma's jealousy only deepened as rumors began to circulate that Nnshera was pregnant. When Nnshera discovered she was pregnant, it felt like a dream. For so long, she had believed that her body was incapable of doing what the villagers deemed essential, bearing and nourishing a child. But as the weeks went by and her pregnancy progressed, her body began to change in ways that surprised not only her, but the entire village. Her once flat chest grew fuller, her figure softening as her pregnancy advanced. The villagers, who had always mocked her for her lack of physical attributes, were astonished. "It's a miracle," they whispered among themselves. "How could she, of all people, become like this?" The women who had once ridiculed her now sought her out for advice, eager to know how she had achieved such a transformation. Nnshera, for her part, remained humble, never forgetting the years of judgment she had endured. But inside, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had proven them all wrong, not through revenge or malice, but simply by being herself. As Nnshera's pregnancy continued, Kwesi's mother, found herself softening toward her daughter-in-law. At first, had been skeptical, convinced that Nnshera would never be able to give Kwesi the family he deserved. But as she watched Nnshera grow into her role as both a wife and soon-to-be mother, began to see her in a new light. One afternoon, as they sat together in the courtyard, turned to Nnshera and said, "I was wrong about you." Nnshera looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" Smiled, her eyes filled with a rare warmth. "I judged you by what I saw, by what the village said about you. But I see now that you are more than I ever gave you credit for. You are strong, Nnshera, stronger than I realized." Nnshera felt a lump form in her throat. For so long, she had sought approval from those around her, especially from Kwesi's family. To hear acknowledge her strength was more than she had ever expected. "I'm proud of you," continued, her voice soft, "and I know you will be a wonderful mother." Nnshera blinked back tears, her heart full. She had come a long way from the girl who had been scorned by the village, and now, as she prepared to bring new life into the world, she knew that her journey was only just beginning. As Nnshera's pregnancy progressed, her transformation became the talk of the village. Her once flat-chested, slender figure was now blooming with the fullness that the villagers had long associated with fertility and motherhood. The whispers of doubt that had followed her all her life were slowly replaced by admiration and awe. The very people who had ridiculed her for years now marveled at how she embodied the ideal of womanhood they had always held dear. "Can you believe it?" one woman said to her neighbor as they passed Nnshera in the market. "She's more beautiful now than any of us ever expected." The neighbor nodded, her eyes wide with surprise. "I thought she would never have children, but look at her now. She's carrying like a queen." The older women in the village, those who had been the harshest critics of Nnshera in her youth, now sought her out for advice. They approached her cautiously at first, unsure of how she would react to their sudden interest in her. But Nnshera, ever humble and kind, welcomed their questions with grace. One day, as she sat beneath the large baobab tree near the village square, an elder named Abena approached her. Abena had been particularly harsh toward Nnshera in the past, often leading the gossip about her supposed infertility and lack of feminine beauty. But now, seeing Nnshera's radiant transformation, she felt compelled to speak. "Nnshera," Abena said, her voice hesitant. I wanted to ask you something, if you don't mind." Nnshera smiled warmly, gesturing for the older woman to sit beside her. "Of course, Abena. What is it?" The elder shifted uncomfortably, her pride battling with her need for answers. I have never seen such a transformation. You have become the very picture of motherhood. What is your secret? How did this happen?" Nnshera's smile remained gentle, though she felt a quiet satisfaction in the elder's words. "There is no secret, Abena. I am the same person I have always been. Perhaps it was never about what I looked like on the outside, but what was inside all along." Abena looked at her, taken aback by the wisdom in Nnshera's words. "You speak truth, child," she said quietly. "I see now that we were wrong to judge you. You have always been blessed." As word of Nnshera's humility and wisdom spread, more and more villagers began to change their perception of her. The younger girls, who had once idolized Amma's beauty, now saw Nnshera as a role model for something far deeper. She had proven that true strength and beauty came from within, and her transformation had become a symbol of hope for those who had been judged unfairly. While the village celebrated Nshera's newfound status, Amma's resentment only grew. She watched from the shadows as Nnshera, the girl she had once mocked, now received the admiration and respect that had once been hers. Every kind word spoken about Nnshera felt like a dagger to Amma's heart. Amma had always believed that her beauty would be enough to secure her a life of prestige and admiration. But now, that very beauty seemed to be slipping from her grasp. She had retreated from public life after Kwesi had ended their courtship, but the whispers about her cruelty still followed her wherever she went. Men no longer vied for her attention, and the women who had once flocked to her for guidance now avoided her, fearful of becoming targets of her bitterness. But Amma's pride would not allow her to let go of the grudge she held against Nnshera. In her mind, Nnshera had stolen everything from her: Kwesi, the admiration of the village, and the status she had once enjoyed. Amma could not bear the thought of Nnshera succeeding where she had failed. One evening, as Amma sat alone in her family's compound, her mind raced with thoughts of revenge. She wanted to see Nnshera fall, to remind the village of the woman she truly believed Nnshera was: unworthy, inadequate. Amma knew that if she could find a way to tarnish Nshera's reputation, she could regain her place in the village's hierarchy. But as she plotted, she realized that she had no real power over Nnshera anymore. The villagers no longer listened to her, and even Kwesi had made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. Amma's bitterness began to consume her, isolating her even further from the community she had once ruled with her beauty. Months passed, and soon the time came for Nnshera to give birth. The entire village held its breath, waiting for news of the birth. Though Nnshera had blossomed beautifully throughout her pregnancy, there were still whispers of doubt among some of the villagers. Would she be able to deliver a healthy child? Would her body, once deemed unfit for motherhood, prove everyone wrong? The day of the birth arrived, and Kwesi's home was filled with a sense of anticipation. The midwives worked diligently, and Kwesi, though nervous, remained calm, knowing that Nnshera was stronger than anyone had ever given her credit for. The labor was long, but Nnshera endured it with the same quiet strength she had shown all her life. And when the cry of her newborn filled the air, a collective sigh of relief swept through the village. "It's a boy," the midwife announced, her voice filled with joy. "A healthy, strong boy." The news spread quickly, and soon villagers gathered outside Kwesi's home, eager to catch a glimpse of the child. The women, who had once doubted Nshera's ability to bear children, now marveled at her accomplishment. She had defied every expectation, proving herself not only as a capable wife, but as a mother. When Nnshera emerged from her room, cradling her newborn in her arms, the crowd erupted into cheers. The women who had once mocked her now praised her, and the men who had ignored her now admired her. Mama Abena, the elder who had once led the gossip against Nnshera, stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "You have brought great honor to this village, Nnshera," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We are all proud of you." Nnshera smiled, her heart full as she looked down at her child. She had come so far from the girl who had been scorned and ridiculed. Now she stood as a symbol of strength and resilience, her transformation complete. As the years passed, Nshera's legacy grew. Her story became one of inspiration for the younger girls in the village, who no longer saw beauty as the sole measure of a woman's worth. Nshera's journey from an outcast to a respected wife and mother showed that true strength came from within, and that the judgments of others could not define one's destiny. Even Ya, Kwesi's mother, who had once doubted Nnshera, came to see her as a daughter in every sense of the word. She often spoke of Nshera's wisdom and strength to other women in the village, encouraging them to look beyond physical appearances when choosing wives for their sons. Amma, however, faded into the background. Her once dazzling beauty became irrelevant as the village shifted its values, embracing the deeper qualities that Nnshera had embodied. Amma, consumed by her bitterness, had lost the power she once wielded, and in her isolation, she became a cautionary tale, a reminder that beauty alone was not enough to build a meaningful life. Nshera's story spread beyond Akukrom, reaching neighboring villages and becoming a tale that mothers told their daughters. Her name, which had once been spoken with scorn, was now spoken with reverence. Nnshera had not only transformed herself, but had also transformed the very fabric of the village's beliefs about womanhood, motherhood, and beauty. And as Nnshera sat in her home, surrounded by her loving family, she knew that the journey had been worth it. She had found her place in the world, not through conforming to others' expectations, but by staying true to who she was all along. The moral: true beauty comes from within, and no matter how society perceives you, it is your resilience, kindness, and inner strength that shape your destiny. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to African Tales by Kwaku and Akua for more captivating stories that celebrate African culture and wisdom. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an inspiring tale from the heart of Africa.